Hello and welcome back to a discussion of the Malazan series, all of them. I have to figure out what to call them because it's not Malazan Book of the Fallen. We plan to read everything by Esselmont and Erikson. But we're starting with Gardens of the Moon, which is the first book of the Malazan Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. We are going to be working our way through this series, pretty much 100 pages or so every week, and we'll post what we're reading for the next week in the description because sometimes we forget to discuss ahead of time how far we're reading for the next week. And we are going to be apparently calling ourselves the page burners because all of us here hang out on the pagechewing forum, which is where we and bridge burners, so which is where we do all the planning for this podcast and this discussion. Like pretty much everything we do on the pagechewing forum is open to anybody interested in joining. So if you'd like to come talk to us about these books, consider checking out the pagechewing forum. Or if you don't want to come on the podcast itself but just chat with us about the books, come check out the pagechewing forum because we are doing some offline discussions there as well. I have the usual group of friends with me who will introduce themselves shortly. But the question I have for you today, which might be the question we have every week, we don't know, or we might just, talk about paint. We don't know. But today, tell us about what character or plot point you're most interested in discussing through the conversation today. And we'll try and make sure that we hit all of them as we go because there's a lot to talk about. Steve, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I'm Steve you can find me on pagechewing and all the podcasts, Speculative Speculations. We can go on and on. But the part I'm most interested in talking about is actually the crone.
Oh,
That's
I
a
like
good
that.
one.
That's a curveball.
Yes.
I was not
Yeah.
expecting that. Okay.
Okay. And Carl then.
Yeah, I'm Carl. This is my second time through the series, and I'll go ahead and jump the gun a bit and say, just plug my book, Truth of Crowns. It's an epic fantasy inspired as much by classical tragedies and the works of Shakespeare as it is traditional epic fantasy stories. And actually, something I forgot to mention last week is AP Canavan was my developmental editor, and he is best known for having worked as one of the early readers for Steven Erikson and Ian Esselmont. In fact, he's continuing to do so, and is as brilliant as you would imagine for having worked on their books. So that's my little plug. As for what I'm most excited to talk about, it's actually related to the craft of writing. I'm excited to talk about the structure of this book as it relates to the structure of the series as a whole. I will do that obviously without spoilers, but I have some thoughts.
Nice.
Dan?
I guess I'm the only one left. Yeah, and I'm Dan. I've read this book specifically several times, but the whole series never. And I'm interested in knowing what you guys think about that section with Krupp and him going on the hill and talking with mysterious people, which I don't understand. But maybe it's explained later.
Yeah.
I don't remember. But I want to know what everyone's thought about that.
Cool. I want to talk about the Deck of Dragons reading in the second one that we saw.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. We'll probably go through the chapters and go haphazardly when we need to, but we'll start from the beginning of chapter, which I forgot to mention. Today's discussion is going to be chapters 3 to 6. We did chapters 1 from the prologue to chapter 2 in the previous episode. So we start with an epigraph about Telumen Toblakai, which read very interestingly. There was some interesting choice of language there, let's call it that. Let me pull this up. Their legend rots my cynical cast and blights my eyes with bright glory. So it seems like they are being praised, but not quite. What do you guys think that means?
Definitely like an underhanded compliment, or maybe the reverse is more accurate, where it's like an almost complimentary attack on them,
Yeah.
where it's like, their legend, like, so their legendary rots his cynical cast, Gothos, who we learn a little bit about in these chapters,
Yeah.
and, blights his eyes with bright glory. Again, it's like, these people are awesome, and they ruin me for it. They're horrible. They're so awesome, it's terrible. They're awesomely terrible.
Yeah.
It is interesting. Uh, many of my thoughts I cannot talk about, so I'm gonna put that to even Dan.
Yeah. Yeah. Steve, Dan, do you guys have thoughts on this?
Kind of missed that, honestly.
Yeah, fair enough.
I've noticed I miss a lot because I've read this. This is my third time reading this book, and there's a lot that I did not catch the first two times. I don't know how, but I didn't catch it.
Mm.
I think the last thing I'll say, perhaps as a bit of additional foreshadowing, is that this introduction to the Toblakai is one that essentially highlights them as being a force to behold, but one that should in many ways terrify you. And I think, we're introduced to a Toblakai, or not introduced, but informed that a character we were introduced to in chapter 2 is a Toblakai, Belladin Skullcrusher, who weeps over his fallen lover, Nightchill. And I think that is an interesting, I would just say keep your eye on the Toblakais, although it may be a while for that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And it does have a sense of foreboding, doesn't it? I think the other thing, like in response to what you were saying, Steve, is the epigraphs apparently, and I say apparently because I didn't catch this the first time around, are sort of setting the tone for the chapter and setting the theme, and like they are sort of the themes of the chapter in a bit of a microcosm. So, which I think is true of epigraphs in general, but I think they may be a little bit more intense in the series. But yeah, so I missed a lot the first time around. I noticed things more because because the eyes tend to snag on words that I don't understand yet, right? So having finished the series, I know what Athelemin, Tarteno, Toblakai implies, and so everything else that follows from there, I can understand, sort of. I mean, I still don't fully make sense of this because again, like I said, I'm bad at reading poetry. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So
a little sorry, I guess I have one more thought, which is just that this is talking about a race of people, right? And it is such an Erikson move that it is common in epigraphs in series that employ them, fantasy and sci-fi, like Dune is the one I think of. And Erikson says he stole the structure of Dune to apply to Guardians of the Moon specifically. And Dune famously has epigraphs that give you context for what you're about to read, that foreshadow things, that delve into thematics that maybe aren't discussed explicitly on the page, and sometimes they even just expound world building. And it is such an Erikson move to essentially properly introduce a whole race of beings in the most obscure, poetic way, where like you're reading this and you're like, I don't know what, like the first time through you're like, what is he talking about? What it like you can get vibes sort of, but you don't really know, anything about these people. And it's very amusing, and I think is very characteristic of the series as a whole. And in the same vein, is much more meaningful with the additional context of who these people are.
yeah. So the last thing I want to say about that poem before we move on is, there could be two ways to read that, right? Like one, they make everybody else look bad, and the other is their being good makes things bad for everybody else. Like that's how I'm interpreting the sort of weird combination of words there of like the positivity and negativity. With that in mind, and the Tuvlakai character that we've been introduced to, and knowing what we know about what he's planning to do, he's planning to build a barrow for his. We find him in mourning, right, with his dead partner, and she's in a burlap sack now, and he plans to go build her a barrow, but it's not time yet.
He needs to go quite far, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Would the army allow him to just leave?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Good luck stopping him. You have to break out the big guns. I mean, he's a high mage, right? And
a skull crusher, I guess.
And the skull crusher, exactly. I mean, I think one of the things you definitely get the sense of, if you read the poem carefully, and then you also obviously read Bellardine's scenes, is that they do in some ways seem to be a more, I hesitate to use the word simple, but I think that is often from the perspective of outsiders, maybe the way they're viewed. Like they're the fantasy savage, right? Or a version of the fantasy savage. And obviously I'm using a term that I think we would hesitate to use in this day and age, but like it's the barbarian, right? The barbarian archetype, and Bellarden does kind of embody that, but already is in some ways subverting it because he's a mage, right? He's not going around like, I mean, apparently he crushes skulls, but we don't see him doing that, right? We see him weeping over his lover and doing great magic, and we know he rose up as a sorcerer. So I think there is already some implications of added depths to these maybe traditional fantasy archetypes.
Yeah. I like what you said about simple, because that is talking to him gently and sweetly, and handling him in a childlike manner, because he's in mourning, obviously, but you could read more into that maybe about how people talk to him in general. I don't know. And the way people come and complain to her about what he's doing. So rolling back a little bit, the opening of this chapter is Paran on a boat, and Topper comes back to tell him where he's going.
And I think that's where I think I got validated from what I said last time, because that's what there's a throwaway line about Paran, I think, or Topper saying the Morak look like grasshoppers. But I don't know if it's an actual description. I think it's more of a just I don't know, a joke or something. But I think that's why I thought they looked like that, because I somehow remembered this vague.
Well, I think they like ride grasshopper looking bugs too.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, they're described, but they could. I was trying to figure out, while reading, I was like, does this exactly match a grasshopper, or it could be any other bug? And I think it could be any other bug in reality.
Right.
Based on the description, it's not specific enough, I think.
I'm curious for y'all. What are your takes on Topper?
Not a whole lot yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of characters.
Yes. Yeah. Topper is definitely an enigmatic one too. He keeps everything close to the chest. So Perrin is now the captain of the bridge burners, right? Anyone have thoughts on that?
I like the interaction with him and the rest of the brigade when he goes to meet them, and I think him coming from nobility and not really having experience makes him a little bit relatable and makes it more interesting to see how he reacts to how they react to him. And there's not really a life expectancy is very very short.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Paran is going to now be captain of the company that's led by the man who talked to him and told him not to be a soldier. So I think that sort of gives an indication, I guess. And I think Whiskey Jack has a monologue about this later, about how quote unquote low they have sunk since things happened, and 11 years ago, 9 years ago, something.
There's a lot of wonderful dramatic irony in this whole setup. right? That it's everything from right, exactly, that Perrin is now the captain of the man who told him not to become a soldier, to the fact that he is the most green person here. I mean, he's literally not been in a battle yet, and he's now the captain of this extremely veteran group of people who were the emperor's, like, most favored force. To, he's a noble among commoners, among this motley crew of, like, very like Guardians of the Galaxy-esque, like, look at all of these weirdos who like all hang out together. And then you have Perrin, who's like fancy pants, Mr. Silver Spoon, up his ass, is now in charge of them, and he just does not fit in. And as you said, there's the added tension of their captains keep dying, and the life expectancy is very low, and we see that play out in these chapters. That's one of the things I remember when I first read, being like truly blown back by that. Steven Erikson is like, yeah, no, the captain doesn't live very long, and then proceeds to, in the same chapter, kill the captain. And you're like, okay. And he literally only survives because of Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah.
But needless to say, it is not necessarily a good thing for him.
It's interesting how people, when they look at Perrin from a distance, I think Topper had a little bit of this too, but the agent that he meets here, I don't think we get POV from Talk the Younger, if I remember correctly, but some of the bridge burners, when they see him, their first view of him and the impression they form from just how young he is and how sure of himself he seems to be, etc., to when he starts talking to them, how quickly they switch over their opinion. It's interesting because, like, this seems like we don't really know how the other captains died. I don't think the bridge burners have been killing their captains, but seems they've been getting somewhat incompetent captains. So they think that this person might, actually last, and then 2 seconds later he gets stabbed.
I think the bridge burners did kill at least one of them, if I
You
remember
think so?
correctly. Or was
Oh.
it someone else? There was someone that was saying, I don't know, some sort of congratulations from the mage or from the empress, and then he got stabbed like 2 hours after.
Oh,
I don't know
yeah.
if it was the captain though. Maybe it was someone else.
It was, yeah, they were talking about that, yeah, one of the mages basically went up on stage. We even found out who it was. It was the head of the Claw, I think it was.
Oh, it was a mage. Okay, I see.
And or it was a member of the Claw. That we were given like their rank even further along, and they went up, yeah, on stage and were assholes. Or was an asshole to the bridge burners, and then proceeded to get their throat cut. And it is left ambiguous as to who did the cutting. I feel very confident I know who did it, but I am curious who you think killed that individual, who I think is unnamed.
I don't know. It could be anyone.
Who killed Perrin?
Well, we know who killed Perrin.
I mean, that's a question too, right? We
Yeah.
should have a good idea. If you certainly read, closely, you should be able to figure it out. But Steve, what are your thoughts?
On that one, well, on the first question, I'm not sure, but on the second question, I'm pretty sure that it was Sorry, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Very
think
much.
they do say pretty much.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
They all gang up on her, and I don't know if they are explicitly scolding her for doing the stabbing, but I think they address it obliquely by saying that by chastising her for disappearing on them, I think.
She also, in the scene, I mean, it's her. A girl is talking, a girl
Yeah.
stabbed Perrin. And
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
then
I think there's a bridge
talk
burn
to
in the
Doc.
tavern, and they're talking about the previous day captains, and they're like, wait a second, we're sorry, right?
Yeah.
And then we have the other scene, it's pretty close. So yeah.
What I will say, I don't think this is a spoiler because I don't think we ever are told exactly, but I'm pretty sure Sorry is the one who killed the guy who talks shit as well. It is left
Maybe.
ambiguous, and I think what you were picking up on, Dan, is the bridge burners very much are like, we get rid of our cat, like you're not gonna last long. Like they imply that they kill their captains, but I don't think they actually do, with the exception of Sorry who is secretly murdering people in the night and killed someone in like chapter 2, I believe it was as well.
I thought they arranged them to get killed if they're too annoying. That's what I thought. But
I think that is what they imply. I don't think that's actually what's happening here. Because especially as you get to, I think most of them are too moral people to do that. While Sari is at this point possessed by a god and is essentially a cold-blooded murderer. Which, as you mentioned, Steve, on the forum, I love that you mentioned how tragic her story is. Because it is, right? She was just this like ordinary girl and becomes a chosen one in the worst possible way.
Yeah.
I mean, she would have died otherwise.
Maybe. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Would that have been better? I mean, now she's like a possessed killing machine.
Yeah.
Or maybe she's having fun. I don't know. Like, we don't know what.
She's having fun.
We don't know how much of her personality and her consciousness is in there, right?
She's living her best life.
I mean, maybe.
Is Riga in control? Because they had the interaction in the first book, so is she even there anymore, or is she just a shell?
It doesn't feel like she's in control, does it?
No.
Who knows? No, sorry, I was trying to be Dan, but I got distracted by a phone call. But yeah, I don't think we know yet because we don't have any Sari POV, so we really don't know what's going on with her or how much of the pre-Sari girl is in there or Riga, whether she's controlling anything.
Yeah, but I mean, from the brief talking that we've had in the chapter with Riga, the girl, and the descriptions of her now and what she's done, it doesn't seem like there's much left.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And we don't even get any views of her like sort of in a dazed state or having lost time or anything. At least we're not getting those aspects of her looking lost. We only get views of her just being this what's the word I'm looking for, dangerous person that everybody's terrified of.
It is interesting. She's a 15-year-old girl, and she's not particularly large, and everyone is terrified of her. She walks in a room, and everyone is like, their blood runs cold. It's crazy. It's sad. But that's,
a little bit surprised it took him a while to figure out it was her. I guess they didn't really take her too seriously at first. After some discussions, they kind of put it together, but
they seem to know or guess something's off about her, right? In that conversation between Quickpen, like where Quickpen, Kalam, Whiskey Jack, and Tatasail are, they're all filling Tatasail in or trying to keep as much back from her as possible, but get her to cooperate anyway. They talk about how they think that Sari is related to the shadow thing. I don't remember what they call it.
Yeah.
The Virgin of High House Shadow.
Yeah, that's Tatasail's deck.
That's Tatasail thinking.
Right? Yeah.
I don't think she tells anyone, does she? She just thinks about it herself.
No, she distinctly does not tell them. She thinks about telling them, and she doesn't.
Yeah. So she, so they think that she's connected, but it almost feels like they're keeping her around, to see what she'll do, or maybe not, because Whiskey Jack wants it to not be a god involved in all of this. He wants to think that she's just that evil, and even compares her to Kalam, which makes sense because she's terrifying, and Kalam is terrifying. He used to be a claw and he got out of it, which apparently nobody can do easily.
Yeah. A lot of mystery in the backstories of the characters. Quickben as well. We know as of this that he was found on a different continent, and that everyone he was with at the time ended up dead.
Yep.
And then he joined the Bridge Burners.
Yeah.
And also he uses magic that Tattersail does not recognize and thinks is crazy powerful.
Well, we're going to get some more details in the next books.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I think we might.
Yeah.
There's a
I
lot of
was,
metal.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
No, I was just gonna ask if everyone else also got the impression. Like to me, it's kind of hard to imagine the bridge burners as more than like a dozen people or whatever they're left here, like because they feel like such a tight knit group. But it's kind of like I can't imagine before there used to be like how many hundreds of them
Over 1,000,
or a
maybe
Thousands.
1,000? Yeah,
1,300 or something.
it kind of doesn't feel like that, does it?
Yeah.
It definitely seems like they have a very core group of like buddies. Although
Yeah,
I do think some of them you get the sense have been around longer and know each other better than maybe some of the others.
and the
Uh,
rest were just like standard soldiers, sort of, maybe slightly better, but not, like these guys.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, exactly. These are the survivors. So you wonder is like, was it just luck or how were they the survivors, right?
Yeah.
Well, we find out a little bit about that in these chapters because Fiddler apparently gets these feelings, and he had one about the tunnel,
Right.
and so they got out of it.
That's right.
Hmm.
Forgot about that. You're right about that. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
There's lots of meddling, lots of gods meddling.
Yes, so many. And the twins of fortune or luck. Are those the
say-
same thing?
Related, yeah. Who are the real meddlers here, though? The gods or the humans?
The gods.
The gods meddling in human whims or the humans meddling in godly whims?
From what we've seen now, it seems the gods meddling with humans, from what we've seen now, right? Because the hounds and
Right.
then killing Paran and then interfering with Paran getting killed and all those things. It's all the gods interfering with humans just, being very nice to each other or whatever.
It being very nice to each other, yeah.
Well, just
Yeah.
normal human stuff.
Planning
Yeah.
assassinations, normal human stuff.
We have Sari with the hounds. We have Paran. We have who else? There was something else that the gods interfered with, wasn't there?
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff in Darujistan that they
Yeah.
interfered with. But
A lot of coin spinning.
I was going to argue, Carl, that meddling requires foreknowledge of what you are doing and say, no, of course it's the gods meddling with humans. But then I remembered that Quickpen and Hairlock are up to something and they're trying to chase down the hounds. So, yeah, I think it's a bit of both.
Well, that feels more like in response to something. It's not like they're trying to set up something from what we know, right?
Yeah,
They're trying to figure out who's trying to kill them.
that's true. So they're not technically trying to change anything, just do some investigation, I guess.
Well, maybe stop whoever's trying to kill them, but if no one was trying to kill them, they probably wouldn't meddle with all this random bullshit. Maybe.
Maybe.
From what we know. I'm just saying, from what we know.
Yeah.
Just guys being dudes, you know?
Yeah.
I want to briefly highlight a term we're introduced to in these chapters. I think it maybe was mentioned once in one of the previous chapters, but ascendant, an ascendant, it's a capital A ascendant, that's one that I would just encourage the readers and everyone to kind of think about it and be reckoning with it. Obviously, these are like powerful beings in some respect, but it's not seemingly a synonym for God. And part of the reason I mention it is because it is never defined. And so you kind of interpret your reading and exactly where the lines are. But ascendance is as some sort of being of great power. And the definition beyond that, yeah, I would say is up to the reader.
And they give you headaches when they're around you.
Yeah, that's right. They're so badass. They hurt your brain.
Yeah. I mean, there is details on Ascendant in this part, but I think if it's the first time you're reading, you wouldn't really think too much about it.
Yeah, one of them that I think is worth acknowledging because it is crucial to the whole series as a whole and like the structure of the kind of the meta structure of things is that power draws power, and that when these ascendants arrive, they attract other ascendants. And then I think we get a twisting of that, which is in Darujistan. I think they say something like wizards draw wizards or something. It's like magic draws magic. I forget, but there's like a parallel. But basically, the idea is that powerful beings, powerful events attract other powerful beings, other powerful events.
Yeah.
And so you have building to a convergence of sorts.
I think, but they're also somewhat mentioned or whatever related because they do. I don't remember who, but there's someone that talks about what happened in the Empire some years ago. Like it actually tells you what happens, right? But I didn't catch it the first time. I remember. I didn't think anything of it. But But if you have read even a couple of books, you know what they're talking about.
Yeah, we actually get a crazy amount of exposition. I had forgotten how much, like, for how famous this book and series is for not expositing things. In these chapters, there's a shitload of exposition. Like, the bridge burners just stop and tell Tattersail a bunch of Imperial history. It's like, it's crazy. And without the context, a lot of it is just, I'm sure on the first time, is just gibberish. But they do tell you a lot of, like, major events and happenings that went on just prior to the story. It sort of reminds me of, like, in A Song of Ice and Fire, Robert's Rebellion, which is kind of the background of the whole story. And that's kind of what you're getting here, is the really crucial events around and before the Emperor's assassination.
Yeah. But technically, I remember reading it. It feels like some of the stuff when you read it in the next books, you're like, oh shit, the plot twist. But it's like, wait a second, no, they actually literally told us before exactly this thing. I just wasn't paying attention. Or didn't realize what it was being said, right?
Right.
Yeah. Which is cool because you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get the joy of the reveal, but then you get the satisfaction of, oh, this was already there and I know what it means on a reread, which is interesting when a book is written to be reread.
We may be even talking about the same thing, but I do just want to say, I want to encourage, if there are any first-time readers listening, and I hope there are, that there is literally, they walk you right up to explicitly telling you one of the major reveals in the early books in either chapter 3 or chapter 4, as they're doing a lot of exposition. It's like one of those things where reading in hindsight, it's like, oh wow, that was really obvious. Like they really, like, they go there. But they don't explicitly say it.
Yeah.
But they talk all around it, and the characters just never make the leap. But I'm not going to say anything more than that because I don't want to spoil anything. But I would look at those kind of expository dialogues, and if you're interested in theorizing, there's some really juicy stuff to dig into in that section.
Yeah, but it's probably better to I'm not saying better, but it works well just to let the books explain things to you as they, get discussed more in depth. Like you're not missing anything by not understanding all these things immediately. So
yeah, it's just like with the characters. Like you don't have to understand everything. You don't have to guess everything, figure everything out. Like just trust that you'll follow it generally, and you probably will.
Yeah, but just so many characters, names to remember, some things to remember. It's just so hard. Even if these characters were introduced to like, I think 10 or 12 or even more characters, right? Just in like the last 2 chapters, I think.
Yeah.
So. And a lot of them aren't named. Like I think we got some guard perspectives, especially in Darujistan. I think we got like 3 or 4 different guard perspectives. The guards weren't named, but
one of them was, right?
Maybe.
Always code name, I think.
Oh yeah, the code name. Yeah, when he sends the note.
I guess. Yeah.
And what was I gonna say?
I don't know.
Yeah, just that there were a bunch of perspectives. So like, not every character is important, but they just drive things forward, or we get a different view of some things, so keep things interesting. But also means, you don't need to get hung up on characters. Just we'll remember them when we do.
There's a lot of characters. I know I've said that before. There's a ton, and then we get a new character, get a little bit of background, then he's dead.
Yeah, I'm curious among all of this. these mini characters. What do you, in our very limited point of view, and I mean, admittedly, you guys potentially have some additional context of having read later books, although you may or may not remember them. What do you think is going on in the scheming in the background here? I mean, there's this conspiracy that seems to be being investigated. What do you think is going on?
You mean inside the Empire?
With the Empire, I mean.
Oh, okay.
Like among the bridge burners and everything, like, you know, our characters now, Tattersail, right? A big development here is Tattersail and Hairlock and the bridge burners are essentially allied against Tayshrin, who they believe turned on them and killed.
Yeah, but why would he?
And so, yeah, my question is, why would he? Do you think he did in fact turn on them? We seemingly get confirmation because Rake in chapter 6 says that that's what happens.
Yeah.
And he kind of watched it from on high. So what was he doing there?
Yeah.
Why would he do this? What's going on? I'm curious if you have any thoughts at all or theories about what's going on there.
The characters do say that it's possible just the Emperor's cleaning house of the old guard, pretty much, right?
Right.
Like that is one of the theories, which also does make sense from what we've seen up to now.
That's definitely a logical theory, right? Yeah, for sure.
So
seems like someone wants the bridge burners gone. They're trying to disband them. So the bridge burners are obviously important in some way. Although they seem like kind of a mess, they are important. And also with Tayshrin, really no theories on that yet, other than the gods are meddling. Maybe, I don't know. I have no idea. There's a lot of maneuvering though that I'm sure we'll talk about here in a little bit. But
I have to say, Tayshrin really burned some bridges with the bridge burners, right?
Nice.
That was good.
That was a good singer, Dan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That dad joke that landed.
Yeah, that was good. The quick bend last week and bridge burners burning bridges this week is pretty good. You're on a roll. You have to keep it going. We expect a zinger every week now.
No, Erikson just prove a ball for me. I just put it in. Not doing much.
Thanks to you, Dan. I'll never look at Quick Pen the same way again.
Yeah.
Every time I see his name, I laugh.
It is so good.
Poor guy. Poor guy.
Well,
maybe we'll get some confirmation one way or the other later on. I don't remember.
okay.
I'd rather remain oblivious.
Yeah, his girlfriend enters the scene to say, and by the way.
Well, it could be an interesting topic, I know, talking about some male sexual issues in the fantasy series. It's not been done before. It's a topic that affects a lot of people, you know?
Yep.
Nothing shameful about it.
Did it ever come up in Baker? Not to get us off track, but I feel like of all series, that should be one where it should come up, but I feel like it doesn't. Like, Akemi never gets whiskey dick or something, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. They're always saying Baker, how good it is, right?
Sorry, this is off top. I blame you, Dan.
Yeah. No, but that's actually a good point. I can't think of many books in which there's sex scenes and they say, didn't go that well, could have been done better. You know what I mean? It's always like, it seems pretty good when it happens.
You should read some Joe Abercrombie then, if you haven't. Okay. I feel like you've read Abercrombie, haven't you?
Yeah, it's the first law, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember its sex scenes.
There are some bad sex scenes in that one.
Yeah, so those are some really awkward ones, yeah.
Yes.
Book 2?
Like,
I can't remember.
Yeah. In fact, I think there were very few where the people come out feeling good.
It's always really awkward and weird.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so I guess continuing on the foreshadowing and all of that. Varsha, do we want to talk about the Deck of Dragons?
Yes. I think the main question I had about that, I guess we'll do questions later, but did you want to talk about the scene at a high level? I think one thing that I wanted to bring up is just how much sense of power there is in a Deck of Dragons reading usually. Like, someone else is directing the events, right? You're just like putting the cards out, and which is interesting. Like, where does it start? Does it start where you shuffle, like the sense of the power that's influencing the whole thing, or do you pull randomly from the deck? I don't know. I have questions about the details, but it's not important. What I want to know is, we know the of the cards she pulled, the sorry one, Virgin of Night or Shadow. What?
Shadow?
Shadow.
Yeah,
That was
definitely Shadow.
There was the thing of night or darkness or whatever, which was Rake, and there was one that she pulled, the Mason of Death,
Yes.
who apparently builds barrows, and there was the use of the word menhir. Menhir, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Menhir?
Yeah, menhir, which, yeah, that works. And that, so we don't know anything about the Mason so far. At least I don't know anything. I haven't been able to track who that's supposed to be. But given this and the fact that he builds barrows and that he's a Mason, and the opening poem, the by Gothas about Toblakai, they use the word menhir there,
Menhir.
right?
Yeah, I checked. Menhir.
Yeah, they do.
I love menhirs. They're
Yes.
so cool.
Already?
Oh, they're so cool. Just a stone, a big stone upright. It's pretty cool.
I agree. I think I'm with you on that. So cross not these stolid menhirs. So that's that. So basically, I'm trying to remember who this is. I have no idea. I'd like us to guess whether or not it is referring to Belladin. I guess we don't know enough to say whether it's him, but I feel like all of it is pointing to the one Toblakai we know about so far.
It's a very good question. I will say, the only thing I'm going to say about all of this is that is the reading that had my jaw on the floor within the context of the series.
I thought what I was reading from that was like, oh, the guy that digs the graves, it probably means there's going to be a lot of dead people. That's how I read it. Very simple.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I mean,
I
I
was
feel
like, oh, the conflict between these ascendants is going to lead to a lot of death. That's how I read it. But again, that's very simple.
Yeah. No, but I think that's the nice thing. I was thinking about this as I was reading this book and maybe a different one the other day, is a lot of these, with poetry, you come with a lot of interpretations and many of those could be true. I feel like with prose, sometimes we don't engage quite as much, but things could be true on multiple levels, right? Like what you said perfectly makes sense. Another
thing I want to throw out is, I think right before we get that reading, or right after, before, maybe, we're introduced to some sort of subordinate of Hood, the subordinate of Death.
Oh, yeah.
As well, right? So that's another possibility, right? Yeah. The one who saves Gano's parents' life.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's a different guy, right? They say he's, what do they call him? They call him something else. They don't call him the Mason. They call him I can't remember what.
Do they give a title? I don't remember them giving
a title. Gave him a title. I thought.
They are very clear that he's not Hood himself.
Yeah.
I thought they gave him like sword or not sword, something. They tell something.
Yeah, did they?
But maybe I'm wrong.
They do at some point reference a Knight of Death.
Is he mentioned the Knight?
But I can say that guy is definitely not the Knight of Death. And that's not. That's all I'll say about that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Wait, no, they tell us who the Knight of Death is. Oh wait, that's not a spoiler. That's in the exposition. I forgot. Freaking what's his name? The guy who dies.
The something.
The previous High Fist.
He's the first sword of the Empire.
Yeah.
Dasim Ultor is the Knight of Death. That he says.
Didn't he refuse it though? I don't remember.
No, he did make a deal, and then I think they say he broke the pact because tragedy happened.
But is he still the Knight of Death if he broke the deal?
I don't know. Maybe it's the guy that went to save Paran. Maybe. Don't know. Okay.
I'm gonna text you about this, Varsha.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, I do like the deck of dragons too.
Yeah.
You can read a lot into it. I mean, that's how tarot reading works. You just say
Yeah.
a bunch of vague things and anyone can read anything. Sorry if anyone believes in tarot cards, but
Oh,
uh,
but that's the thing, though. Well, sure, some of this is interpretation of the reader, but the cards are alive and they change and they're giving
yeah,
you information. So
yeah,
that I found to be very
yeah.
cool.
No, I'm saying from a reader's perspective,
Yeah,
especially a first-time reader, right? You can read a lot of different things into it,
that's true. Yeah, that's true.
right? But are the cards like they're not paper cards, right? They're like slabs of wood or something, or am I also imagining that?
They come in different forms.
Okay.
Be
And
hard
I
to
like
shuffle.
how, yeah,
In many
it's
different.
very hard to shuffle. Just that.
if it was made
But
of
for
wood.
some reason, I thought they were some sort of slab of wood or whatever. But
Yeah.
again, some of
They-
these images I have in my mind are from reading the series before. I don't know where they come from.
These might be, I don't remember. There definitely are versions that are just cards.
Okay.
They're like paper cards. There are some that are wood. Like again, they come in like different
I'm just wondering if
sizes.
paper cards were a thing. Even in medieval, were paper cards a thing in medieval Europe? Could you make paper cards?
They
I
had
don't know.
parchment of a kind. I mean, it also depends on when in the Middle Ages you're talking about.
But I don't know if you could have parchment cards act as playing, as shuffle them and
Right.
do a
I
sort of.
don't know about that. I mean, certainly not the like plasticky sort of kinds we have now. They would be very different.
Okay.
Books were very different back then.
But
I
I
mean, a lot
love how all these cards, like, they kind of look at them and you can see infinite details in them, sort of. Like, the more you look into them,
they're
the more
alive.
random small things you see. Or you see something in the background, or you see the little thing there or there, right?
It is very cool. It's something I would really like to see. Like, I would love to see this series or an adaptation of any part of this series animated, because I just feel like
Mm,
live action could never do it justice budget wise. And then like things like the Deck of Dragons that would be so beautiful to animate.
yeah.
I mean, it reminds me kind of the like pictures in Hogwarts and Harry Potter, that you have these
Mm,
images that like you interact with. It's very cool.
yeah. And the other thing I was wondering about the Deck of Dragons is, where are the dragons? Again, I don't remember if this comes up in the future, but it's called Deck of Dragons, but we haven't seen any dragon in the actual deck, right?
Or talk about dragons even, right?
Or talk about dragons anywhere, yeah. And they feel kind of a bit different than this universe, like the way it's set up right now, right?
Yeah,
There's no mention of creatures like that, really.
we'll get our dragons for sure. But in terms of the deck, I don't know. I don't know if they ever talk about that. Explain why it's
Okay.
called the Deck of Dragons or not. Varsha, do you remember?
I think they do in the
Okay.
later books. Yeah.
Maybe
Okay.
it's the Deck of Dungeons and Dragons, because that's where they
Yeah,
got
that's
it
something
from.
That's
Maybe it could be, I mean, probably.
I had a question, like very unrelated to what we're talking about, but since you brought up Dungeons and Dragons, is ascendant a term used in Dungeons and Dragons, like given the role-playing origins of this, or is that unique to the series?
I thought you could pretty much become almost a demigod at level 20 or whatever, and there's an expansion with like super high levels where you're pretty much a demigod.
I was gonna say, I don't think it's a term, but that's not that I'm aware of. Not in the most recent editions. I haven't played the old, like I didn't play AD&D, which was the second edition, which is what Erikson and Esselmont played. I've only played 5e, and I think I played 4e as well. But what Dan said is basically right, though, which is once you're max level, you're basically a demigod, which is kind of how I imagine being an ascendant. Is like you've just leveled out. You're there. You can fight gods, like, and maybe you are a god.
Okay.
That's the shit.
Because I feel like I can't remember where else, but there was at least one other place besides this series where I saw the term ascendant used, and I don't know if they were influenced by the series or if it's a different term that was used in parallel by two different authors. Anyway, that was random tangent. Anything else about the Deck of Dragons? No.
Very mysterious.
Yep.
And is it related to the coin?
Which coin?
The coin that's spinning.
I mean, I would say yes. Because Because if you remember on one of the cards, the card with the gestures of chance is the card that the coin appears on, the spinning coin.
Yeah.
So when we hear the coin, we're definitely supposed to think of Opon.
Yeah. Who else could it be, right?
Yeah.
It's them. Yeah, you're supposed to think about them.
And they've interfered a few times, right? So it sort of, the connection seems obvious at the moment with them. The Deck of Dragons reading is before Paran gets stabbed, right? So we know that Opon saved Paran later on, and then there's a bunch of times they interfere in the events of the night in Darujistan. They're involved. Do the Deck of Dragons, like the readings, tell us anything? I guess they tell us a little bit about which gods or ascendants are involved, and I guess in some ways, what direction they are involved in. For instance, there was that one about how I can't remember the darkness card, Night of Darkness.
Night of Darkness.
Yeah,
Yes.
Night of Darkness is in opposition to the Hound card, right? So they aren't going to work together,
Yeah.
I guess. So we know at least some of the alignment and which gods are involved.
Yeah.
And the
You know what
Hound
would be? Go
are
ahead.
just associated with the shadow, right? We know that they are the Hounds of Shadow, right? The gods we've seen who have possessed Sari, one of them in particular, the assassin one, those are gods of shadow. They come from the Warren of Shadow.
Yeah, it's pretty recent.
Mhm.
Yes. It's a newly reacquired Warren.
Repurchased.
Repurchased.
One, yeah.
Rehomed.
But I was thinking that it would be quite interesting to see someone else with less power than these mages do a Deck of Dragons reading, just as a counterpoint to see like how it looks, or maybe they make some mistake or something.
Oh yeah.
Right? Because for now we've only just seen the very perfect, I don't know, the very powerful readings. But I just thought it would be interesting to see that too.
A fake seer, right?
Yeah.
Like the kind you would encounter in real life.
Yeah. Or is the Deck of Dragons just it's very rare to get, and only the most powerful mages have it? Maybe.
You've got to be able to get like a fake one, right? Like you could make a fake one if you know about it. Like it wouldn't even have to have the right cards. What I would wonder though is if you play with it long enough, does the actual Deck of Dragons come out to play?
Yeah.
You know,
like is the power in the deck or in the person reading it?
Yeah. Do you are they used
little
as
bit in the
playing
person-
cards? Yeah.
We know it's a little bit in the person reading because Tashrin says he doesn't really have much skill.
Yeah.
Cell has a lot of skill.
But is there anything in the deck, or is the deck just normal, whatever it is, and it doesn't need to have anything special to it? You know. I don't know. I'm wondering.
Yeah, I think we'll find out a bit more about this. The readings do play an important role. I think maybe once every book at least we get some. But yeah, so what was I going to say? Yeah, anyway, playing cards question on hold. We'll find out, I guess. What else happens in these chapters?
I love the Paran at Hood's Gate.
Oh yeah.
And when he we'll talk about it more when we get to quotes, because I prepared quotes this week.
Nice.
But yeah, I love that description of the gate and the bodies, and
yeah,
so good.
Is the gate made of writhing bodies? Is that what
I think so.
is happening?
Yeah. And then the twins come along and talk smack about death's taste and how poor it is. And yeah, I love how funny that scene is. This guy is on the gates of death, at the gates of death, and Opon is both of them, right? What are their individual names? Anyway, they come and talk smack about Death's taste, and then this guy who's supposed to be Hood but is not really Hood changes shape until they settle on one that they don't really like, and then he tries to talk with a deep voice, and then fails at it. He speaks with a I'm assuming I don't think we know the gender, speaks with a high pitched voice. That whole sequence was very funny.
Yeah, it had a bit of like, ancient Greek vibe, at least the sort of realm of death, in the way that some people seem to just, you can kind of just go in and go out as long as the gods help you or they give you some sort of condition or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
that character definitely reminded me of Charon from Greek mythology, as kind of like he's Death's punk, or Hades' is punk, right?
Yeah.
Like Charon's the god who passages rose the dead into the underworld, and this guy gave me sort of similar vibes. Like he's the lackey who kind of does the drudgery that Hood doesn't want to do. I just want to say now that we're like, it is clear at this point that Hood is the god of death, that the most commonly used slang or curse in this whole series is Hood's balls is just legendary. And I have to be honest, reading this series dramatically influenced how I write fantasy curses. Because previously, like you read like I don't want to like be sending out too many strays, but like you read like Brandon Sanderson, for example, and the characters have the worst curses you've ever seen. It's like this is a man who has never cursed in his life. But Steven Erikson knows how to write fantasy curses. Hood's balls, I'm all up in it.
Yep.
That was a phrase that actually came out very different. That was not intentional. But I'm gonna own it. I'm all up in Hood's balls.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I remember I read once a very good article on, or was it a video on how to write, analyzing how different curses and swear words are in fantasy books and comparing just like what you said. I'll see if I can find it because you probably would be interested in it, have fun with it.
Yeah, that sounds
But
like
yeah,
fun.
some of them are really weak,
Yeah.
let's say.
That'd be an entertaining video for sure.
Yes. Yeah, that would be a fun one. What are your thoughts on luck being an actual force in this series? Do you have any thoughts? I'm seeing a lot of shrugging.
Not a whole lot.
Yeah, usually luck seems to be like the sort of like, oh, balance things out because luck is like 50-50 or whatever. So they're just trying to balance things out. So it kind of makes sense to me, like as a third party sort of force, right? But I don't know if that's the case. Go ahead.
It kind of feels like luck in a sarcastic way, like a luck for who?
Right.
I like this thing I think it's in their conversation with each other that Paran happens to overhear, when they talk about how all the ascendants want certainty, but they revel in the uncertainty. And
Yeah.
I think each time they interfere, not so clear about Paran and how he survived, but at least the times in Rajasthan, they're sort of trying to make events like, it's not clear what they want, but they're just sort of throwing a coin in the direction to see if it'll work, kind of like flipping a coin to say, okay, it feels like they have a lot of contingency plans and so on. So yeah, it is an interesting manifestation of chance and fortune. I don't know what push and pull mean though. Like which is which? Pull makes things happen for you? Or is that
I think
push?
it like pulls things towards you, pushes things away, maybe.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
I thought it was like an action reaction sort of thing. Like when there's one thing happening, there's also necessarily the opposite happening.
Yeah. And I guess when something is being pushed towards you, it's being pulled. No, and
Towards
it's being
someone else,
pulled towards you.
maybe?
It's being pushed away from someone else. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. There was one thing, I guess we'll talk about it in a bit more detail when we do quotes, but the sort of monologue that Paran has about empire and what constitutes empire, I thought that was brilliant. Before we move on to Darujistan, I just want to bring up some other stuff that I thought of in these chapters. Anything else, or should we
The
go
sequence
on?
with the hound.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
of course.
That's pretty awesome, right? We get to see
Oh,
just
yeah.
a single hound in action. I said I want to talk about structure, and so this actually wasn't what I meant when I started, but I do want to highlight how this first act does kind of have a very clear arc over the course that is very kind of traditional in terms of like the parallel sides of it, where it opens with Sari and the hounds story, and it ends with this hound coming in and trying to eat their faces, and eat hairlock specifically. And I love that sequence. The hound is freaky. I mean, you just definitely get a sense for how powerful it is.
Yeah, and we've really built up to that, haven't we? With the aftermath that we get to see of when they let it loose on the army. From there to, I think, some general expressed terror by possibly Quick Ben and Kalam, to this scene. So when the hound actually shows up, and you know that he's going where our friends are, it is terrifying. It is a very gripping scene, and I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. I knew how it was going to end, and I was on the edge of my seat the whole time.
Also, I think Erikson will talk more about tension and kind of scenes, like building tension in action, but he has a good knack for quickly building tension.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's something I also was really appreciating in this read through, is how he built suspense over the course of particularly Act 1. It's just, it's both like it's surprisingly fast paced, like faster paced than I remember, but at the same time there is this like slow building sense of tension and like paranoia, and that you're just gradually developing, and you have moments where it kind of explodes, like when the hound shows up. But it's awesome.
The also, I believe it was in chapter 4, is the mention of Dujak and possibly rebelling.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't want to,
Right.
it seems. But it's mentioned by other
mentioned,
people.
yeah.
They will
Yeah, I
follow
mean, he
him.
seems like this sort of, character, like he seems like he's being driven into that corner, but he doesn't really want to. He just wants to, be a loyal soldier and just do his job, right? He doesn't want to do any of the politics things. But,
yeah. There's also the interaction between Paran and the bridge burners and how they talk smack to him, and his response to I enjoyed that when he said, I don't enjoy taking money from the people who report to me. But I was curious, like that's not typically how people talk to their superiors in the army, right? It's not like they have a relationship like that that is off band. So I think that's a very interesting thing about this series. Not that I've read a lot of military fantasy, but I like that the person in command is not treated, but I suppose they have to, when they have to listen to them and like obey what they say, but this kind of relationship I like.
I think it's pretty fairly typical in books, fantasy book, like, because it shows that soldiers are tough and they don't care about rank because they're better than that, I guess. And the captain's showing that he's just one of the boys, I guess.
I think here it specifically goes to show how non-traditional the bridge burners are.
Yeah.
Because it is brought up that like they don't act like regular soldiers. Like they are ignoring hierarchy in a way. And that is a sign of their dysfunction and how far they've fallen in many ways. And then the one exception to that, I would say, is with Whiskey Jack, who I guess they do still kind of speak maybe a little casually around him, maybe more so than you'd expect. But at the same time, he clearly commands a lot of respect and is a leader that they look to and will people will shut up if he's speaking.
Yeah, I think the way I took it, and I haven't read a ton of military fantasy, but it seems like with all the battles and everything going on, that niceties are kind of out the window, and everybody's scattered. Everyone's kind of just surviving, and you kind of just forget about those things when you don't know if you're going to survive the day. You just stop giving a shit. You just whatever.
Right.
Like, you'll be dead soon anyway. I'm not going to salute you. I'm not going to give you a ton of respect because chances are you won't be around very long. So I'm going to worry about protecting myself and the people that I know that I've fought with, that I've built those bonds with, and outsiders are kind of just disposable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in real life, usually.
Yeah.
That's not what happens.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
the chain of command is important to preserve, I think, in real armies.
Fair.
Yeah, but I think like in long wars where armies are scattered or groups are scattered everywhere, you would probably have to keep it, but I'm sure it's hard to keep that together once you're, your chain of command and you don't have communication with very many people. You're just kind of out hoping to make it through the next day.
Yeah.
It has to be a way to build trust, right? Sure, chain of command, but also they have to trust you. So I don't know. I don't know how real armies work. I barely know how fantasy armies work, but I thought this interaction was interesting.
I think in the past it was more like, if I'm thinking about the Romans, it's like, trust your general because he's had successful career and stuff like that, right? That's a lot of it. But yeah, I don't think that like the commanders mingled much with common troops from what I've read.
No, that's how they would help maintain hierarchies. Is the leaders would not socialize. They wouldn't fraternize because they didn't want to be friends. They needed to make decisions both as commanders, like kind of cold-heartedly making difficult decisions, but also they needed the people below to respect them and not feel like they could argue with them.
Yeah. I guess in most of Human's history too, the commanders were from a higher social rank, so they wouldn't anyways be. But in this case, no, because we know that nobles are not seen very well in the empire, right? So it must be more like, generals and trusting the institutions more than
the person,
nobility or whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of like my job family, where there's a pretty. I'm a software engineer, but there's a pretty flat org structure. Like, I mean, I think sure there is a hierarchy and whatnot, but you can talk to pretty much anybody about anything. It's not I told you so do it. You discuss problems and solve them. So and maybe that's true of other job families too, but this is the one I'm familiar with, and I trust people more for allowing me to have my say than for saying shut up and do what I said. So this sort of has echoes of that kind of power structure, I guess. So,
but I don't know if I would compare my software developer office position with
exactly.
the army.
No, the other one I can think of, and I don't know why this needs to be this way, is in hospitals. I know doctors have a strict chain of command and like hierarchy and whatnot. At least what I'm familiar with. Like my some of my family are doctors in India, so. There is a strictly enforced hierarchy and chain of command there, which, sure, I can see why that might be necessary in an operating theater, but I don't see why that's necessary outside work, but it seems to be true. Anyway, I think there are some places where there are hierarchies and chains of command, which probably
it depends what you're trying to foster. I don't think the army is trying to foster creativity and thinking outside the box, right? They're trying to foster, well, maybe now a bit more than in the past, but if we're thinking
even
most
then,
of the time,
if you're in a battle zone, you're not taking a vote on how you're gonna fight it.
Yeah,
Like,
that probably makes you less efficient if you're thinking, oh, should I do what my
right,
commander told me, or should I think about it instead of just doing it, right?
right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
if we're operating in a small group as we're doing now, like infiltrating, it seems like we're doing, that's probably where the advantage comes in of having, more creative thinking and adapt,
Yeah.
not a super strict command structure, I guess.
Yeah, so that's the thing about Whiskey Jack, though. He seems to be taking inputs. Like, people listen to him and are respectful to him, but he's taking inputs from the people who are close to him, right? And maybe he would listen to anybody who walks up to him and has suggestions. Yeah, again, I think it's complex. I don't have an opinion on like this is how army should be. I just think it's interesting that it is so here. Yeah. Moving on.
Darujistan.
Darujistan. Yes. But I just want to say, daru in Hindi means alcohol. So every time I say the name of the city, I think of alcohol. Though it has nothing to do with it.
There's a lot of drinking that happens,
That's true.
in this chapter. So
yeah, I guess it's time to talk about dance thing, which is Krup's dream.
yes, shall we talk about magnanimous Krupp?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's only me, but the way he talks is a bit grating. After a bit, it starts getting a bit heavy. I would be fine if he just talked in first person. Like, I'm fine with his personality and what he's saying and, all that sort of thing. I just, in third person, it starts getting a bit too much after a while.
I love him. I love Krupp. I'm a Krupp nerd. I'm all the way on it.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
I love how it intensifies and doubles down, and I love especially later in the card playing scene when he basically filibusters the others into surrendering.
It's exactly right. He is annoying. I think that's part of his charm, is he's so annoying, and he's just such a unique character. I mean, one who is such a goofball, like weirdo, like obese, wearing silks, like very net dressed very nicely, like a very loquacious speaker, very conceited, very egotistical, and I guess the question is there more going on underneath?
Kind of gives like a charlatan impression, like,
Right. You Dan brought up, so we're introduced to him through the dream sequence. What were your thoughts, comments, questions about that?
I don't know, like, well, for one, I didn't realize it was a dream sequence for most of it. Because it's not set up as a dream sequence, right?
Yeah, yes, it is. In his dream, the
Is
small
it?
round man,
Yeah.
literally the opening line.
Yeah.
Okay. I think
It's easy to miss.
I might have, maybe my ebook Kindle issues are coming up, but sometimes it skips a page.
Oh. So did you just read this and the previous one as a single chapter?
I don't remember, but it does happen sometimes when I click forward and it does, and I click again and it skips a page.
Ah, okay.
So maybe that's what I missed the slight beginning of it. But yeah, but still, I still didn't understand what they were trying to convey. Like, what I don't know, because he says a whole thing of like, are you my virtues or his weaknesses or whatever, right? Like, it's supposed to mean something, this dream, but I don't know what it's supposed to mean.
Yeah. I wondered if the sequence is about Crocus somehow, because I'm trying to find the parts that refer to him. At the very beginning, oh god, where's the page? Chapter 4, right? No, not 5. He makes a funny joke about youth and youths, and then later on they tell him not to interfere with the one who gets the coin or something like that, and then Crocus gets a coin. So basically I think they're saying don't interfere with that, but I think he basically says I'll do what I want.
I
I
think,
see.
I mean, one thing to take from it is, particularly in the opening, he talks about how uh, portents, essentially, and visions of the future manifest themselves in a lot of different ways in
Mm-hmm.
different people, whether it's the deck of dragons or like knuckle bones thrown into a fire, things like that. For him, it just manifests in his dreams. And the context of these dreams is he is fleeing a burning city, and the burning city in question is Darujistan. And so I think arguably the most important part of this is that Doom is coming to Darujistan, and we know the Malazan Empire is interested in Darujistan, so
Yeah.
certainly doesn't bode well for them. Beyond that, I gotta be honest, I don't, other than characterizing him, which it clearly does,
Yeah.
I also don't really know, like, it just to me is like an amusing scene. That probably goes on a little too long.
I see.
Yeah, I did wonder about the hungers. Like, I thought it made a very interesting picture. Like, it made for a very interesting view of a person and like the things that make them up. And it was interesting that when he left, they all looked better fed for his engagement. So it's almost like he allowed himself to think through the night, and so all these aspects of him are better fed for it. But yeah, I don't know what those parts of the story mean, but I really liked that visualization of a person's inner life and how they had ideas about them being the hungers and the gifts, and what they said about each one. I think those are all candidates for quotes. Not that we'll have time for everything I've underlined, but
I'll throw one out here. As I was glancing over, I saw it and I was like, oh, this one was good. Perhaps saying, what are gods, after all, if not perfect victims?
Yep.
There's a lot you could unpack there.
So, oh, and also I love this bit where he talks about prophecy. Within the walls of his skull rang the dirge of prophecy, and it echoed through his bones. Like it's an unwanted gift, right? Prophecy. He doesn't really want to know. It seems like that's why he's calling it a dirge, I imagine. But I love that characterization of prophecy.
Yeah, usually prophecy is not the person doing prophetizing never ends up in a good place, I guess. It's
Yeah.
never a benefit for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even in our own history, right? Like, not that there's real prophecies, but I'm saying like the supposed prophets are never, almost never
get burned at the
lucky
stake
or whatever. Yeah.
Uh,
what do you say? What is it? I think they say not being a prophet in your own land or something. But that's a different thing, though, because that's because of the people that know you and stuff like that. I think.
Not familiar with that.
I don't remember how the saying goes.
Let me see if I can find it. But you know, on the subject of like dirge-like prophecy, Tadasale was also very reluctant to read cards, right? And Taisharan wasn't, but yeah. Fiddler had a premonition that he wasn't too happy about. So yeah. It's an interesting
It's really
take
a
on.
good thing, right? Like oftentimes, even if you have a prophecy that's like the good guys are gonna win, it's usually at like great cost and makes the person in question miserable.
Yeah. Usually, yeah.
I feel like there was a quote about being a hero in some book. Maybe it was one of these, I don't know.
In many books.
Yes.
It's like that.
Being a hero sucks.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. I was thinking of a slightly more poetic version, but essentially that's the summary. Was it in your book, Carl? I don't remember, but I think you had one too, but I can't remember it.
My book is one that includes ascendants. When you were talking about it, that may be what you were thinking of. I also use a different context, more of an angelic figure than.
But see, I know you read Malazan, so I wasn't confused about maybe where you got it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay, this was a different. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was rewinding. Back to the thing. No, that's my fault.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. The quote that you would, I think no one is a prophet in their own land. I don't know if that's relevant
Yeah,
here, but
something like that. Yeah.
okay. So then we meet a bunch of like crocus on the rooftop, and we get
Mhm.
a rooftop view of the city of Darujistan. Apparently, it runs on gaslight, and
Yes.
only parts of it, the biggest streets of it, are lit by
Mhm.
gaslight. And there are people who go lighting the torches. They dress
Yeah.
strangely too, which is interesting.
It's
Oh,
it's a very Dickensian
yeah.
opening to
Mm.
sequence, like really getting into like the nitty-gritty of the city itself and the atmosphere, and through that, like how it works, like literally the engineering of the city and kind of this creepy group of people who tend the flames, and it just
Okay.
reminded me of Charles Dickens.
To me, it was a very Arabian Nights sort of.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's the
Yes,
vibes I'm getting.
with the blue lights and the belfry and I guess the
Yeah,
misshapen
especially setting
towers.
up
Yeah.
like, oh, there's this city in the, I assume desert or something. Maybe it's not desert, but
I don't think it's a
There's a
desert.
I don't think
lake
it is. But in
nearby.
my mind, it is.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
But it's like, the sort of thing is like, oh, don't worry too much about all the economics of all the land outside and all the stuff. There's the city, right? And there's all the, the thieves running and the assassins on top of the roofs and all those sort of thing. It's got that, magical sort of Arabian Nights sort of feel.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful imagery. I
Yeah.
mean, this like dark, very kind of gritty city with the blue flames blasting through it, and
Yeah,
like you said, shadowy figures running on the rooftops. Like it's chef's kiss, just
very
great.
fantastical.
Yeah.
It is to me one of the most iconic images from the whole series. Darujistan,
Really.
the city of blue flames. I just find it just such a wonderfully evocative description.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of the mind picture being different from what's described, I know we've been told several times, and I didn't remember this through the rest of the series, that Kalam is big in size. He's
Yeah.
very tiny in my head.
No way.
Really.
And I can't change that picture. I just can't.
That's so funny.
Uh,
I imagine him as like the biggest, baddest mofo, like not quite like the Rock size, but like a really big dude. And it because it's important with the like I don't know if important. It's very colorful within Quick Ben, who's this like small, wiry little like you know ratty
mm,
looking dude with the big magic.
Was Quickman small? For some reason I met him like some lanky, sort of pretty tall guy, but very thin.
He I don't know about his height, but he's definitely skinny.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Kalam though, huge.
yeah. We also don't get a lot of descriptions of what people are wearing. So I tend to imagine a lot of them in Indian clothes. Do you guys, I don't know, what is your default clothing when, and I think I said that about um the Prince of Nothing too, right? I don't remember if I said it, but in my head, Esmenet was always wearing a sari. Always.
Interesting.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think it
know.
really depends on the vibes of the story. Like I also had more like kind of Eastern clothes in mind when we were reading Prince of Nothing, but here like I feel like I have a lot of kind of classic fantasy and like almost like ninja-y stuff when we're getting the
Oh,
claws and
really?
shit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you get into the assassins, I'm thinking ninjas like
Okay.
90% of the time.
I was thinking to me, it's very Central Asian, maybe a bit Arabian influence sort of coded, just because Darujistan, right? The
Yeah,
name, that's
yeah.
and the way it's described and sort of the references to, again, Arabian Nights and sort of like. So imagine some sort of mix between Iranian, a bit of Arabian, and a bit of Central Asian
Hmm.
culture, something
Yeah.
like that. I assume that's what I thought he was going for, giving it that name,
I think you're
Darujistan.
onto something with that. I don't know. It's cosmopolitan, definitely.
Yeah,
Because like there definitely are. I mean, there are mentions. I think people look over a lot of like the characters in Darujistan and in general are dark skin, described as having dark skin. Um, But then you have people like Krupp, who are, I'm pretty sure, described as looking pretty pale, and to me is coded in a very classically, like, I almost imagine him as like not French, but like very like kind of aristocratic. I mean, like almost like a Dickensian character. Would be like a bad guy though, and like Dickens, as this very like pompous, like very flowery, flamboyant, haughty accent.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of why I imagine some sort of city like Samarkand or something like that, like the crossroads
Yeah.
of all of these cultures, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's valid. That I think you're right. There's a lot of that influence.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Krupp is also wearing like sherwani or like kurta pajama in my head. So
I love
it's interesting. I don't think about these things until I do, and then it's so strange what what the picture in my head is. Anyway, so okay, Crocus and the assassin war that he is privy to, and then he almost gets killed for that, except Opon interferes and saves him, sort of. Yeah, I guess he decides to save himself by bending down for the coin, but Opon gives him a chance.
I don't think he
with the sense of
decides.
humor.
Yeah.
It's like instinct to just go and grab it, right?
Yeah.
It's not a conscious decision.
Yeah, it came spinning there. Yeah, it wasn't just lying there. It came spinning in front of him. So I guess it makes sense that he would bend down to see what the heck it is and miss the quarrel.
Yeah, because it must have been like an instant decision, because otherwise the guy with the crossbow would have followed him. So it's probably like, oh, something, I dropped something.
Yeah.
And he bends down to pick it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Which made me wonder, like, all of the interference that we saw in these chapters, just how much can they influence how you think? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question, but can the gods actually influence how you think? Because there's this, we know from when Sorry was being recruited that this guy had a constant headache, and he changed his mind. He was going to make a different decision, but ended up making a completely different decision by the time Sorry was done talking to him. And similarly, like Baruch, the alchemist, he wants to figure out who the eel is and, follow down that path. But apparently something prevents him from doing that. And it could be just him deciding to let things lie, but is it also some external influence?
It feels to me like the gods seem, that's a vague feeling, like very influential, either your subconscious or your instinctual part of your, brain, not your conscious part.
Unless you're sorry.
Yeah, but that seems like full possession or something.
Right.
Yeah,
I think the short answer is yes, they can. I think exactly what that looks like probably varies a lot. There's probably a lot of variables in any given situation there. Because like Malik Rel, for example, definitely has his thoughts influenced by the twins.
Well, they probably tried to make it not too obvious.
Right. No, I agree. I'm with you, Dan, that I think a lot of the time it is subconscious, right? They like very quietly, so you don't even notice, like redirect your thoughts.
I wonder if that also makes it so it's less visible to other gods.
Oh,
compared
true.
to a more brute force approach.
Interesting point. I think that makes sense, right? Is that additional, like, having subtlety means that there's a better chance your influence is not going to be noticed, as opposed to notices Sorry and is like, so there's some godly subterfuge going on here.
But what you said before too, you said like power attracts power. Probably if you do it in a subtle way with less power, that probably attracts less power. I don't know if it's I don't remember if it's a rule or a law or just a saying, but
both.
Which also, like, assuming that the gods aren't in this realm, when Opon showed up and threw the coin for Crocus to pick up, everybody around knew something had happened, right? Like anyone who could sense any power, like, oh, somebody's interfered. So when they do the subtle influence, is that, I guess they have to be basically, do they need to be in this realm to do the subtle influence, or can they do it from a distance? Many questions. I don't have answers. something to think about.
Or G, you just can't tell us.
Oh, I actually don't know.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
You can do what I do and read the last page. Not that you'll get anything out of that in these books, but
I would
you
just be even
can
more
try.
confused. That would help.
Cool. Then we follow Crocus to the bar with Krupp and the card game where he just refuses to put the card down. Hilarious.
It's like all our characters, kind of, not all of them, but a lot of them. You know, Malik Rel, the assassin, comes in and turns out he's a member of this little band of merry men playing cards. We have Murillo, who's just like a fop. He's a dandy. And then the drunk, whose name I've forgotten.
Call.
Yeah.
And the assassin is Raylik Nom, I think. Malik Rel is the other guy.
Yeah.
Shit. Different. Yeah, sorry. Ralik Nom. Malik Rel is a very different character. You're right. Ralik Nom.
Another group of colorful characters, which I can imagine being a D&D group, right?
This one really feels like a D&D group.
Yeah.
Like, this one really does. Yeah.
So I've never played D&D and I had no clue. I didn't have any D&D detection.
It's the kind of people that the characters people would make, I feel.
And they meet in a tavern. Like, are you
Right,
kidding me? This is like, these are all the tropes. They all are like a different archetype. You could like fit them into a class. You know, the 5-man band is like an archetype as well, both in D&D and role-playing games and in like fantasy. It's classic. It is classic.
Yeah, and they have some stupid scheme or whatever.
Yes.
To get rid of it.
And they're playing a card game, so that has to be some level of recursion there, right? If that was part of the campaign.
Yes, yeah. And this is like their base, right? This is like their base of operations. Yeah.
Yeah. And Crocus feels all left out and because people are not telling him things and Krupp is gaslighting him and saying no.
He's the shithead kid, right? He's like 16.
Yeah.
And
he's 16. I don't remember how old he was.
He may not be 16 specifically, but he's a teenager.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's like
he must be
19, right?
Is he 19?
18 or 19? Or no, he was 16 or 17. Something like that, yeah.
I hope he's more 16. Based on his, him looking at the naked girl in her bedroom, it makes it slightly less creepy.
He's a doofus adolescent boy, definitely, one or another. I love him. I was immediately charmed by him. He is just kind of just a doofus. I mean, he's at this point he's just like a kid who's in way over his head.
Yeah. And the assassin, I guess Raylik Nom has a chat with his boss and I forget, did they conclude that it is Malazan involvement or that it's not? It's not a guild war.
Yeah, they think it might be. Right?
They don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, they think it might be. So and Raylik Nom has to be bait. Yeah, that's the conclusion of that conversation. And then is that everything with that group? Yeah.
I forget. Who's the guy that killed the prostitute's client or whatever?
Raylik
Not a
Nom.
prostitute.
It's Raylik Nom,
Is she a prostitute? No.
Relic.
No, well, I'm just saying. I don't know how to describe her.
She trades influence and knowledge for other things, I guess. Is that fair?
I don't want to call her a whore, but...
No, I think she's just a noble woman, no?
She's a noble woman who, to be very uncouth about it, whores herself.
A courtesan. That's probably what I was trying to find.
I don't even know. I think she would like turn her nose up at being called a courtesan, but at the same time, she definitely deals in a similar way.
High-end courtesan.
Yeah, courtesans are by nature high-end, but yes.
That one wasn't sure. Like the fact that he chose to kill him, was that a god's influence that made him change his mind at the last second?
He heard this.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Open, yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
I did wonder if that was another instance of meddling.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I see.
Okay.
Question,
Because-
right, is to what end?
He was all set to kill her, and apparently, in a few seconds, it became a much more complex plan. So he didn't like sit down and think about it; it just came to him, and he killed someone else.
Also, he wants revenge, and we don't know why. Something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. And actually, that was the scene that made me wonder if the Ascendants can actually like enter your head and change how you think. But
Yeah.
I like what you said, which is bring some pieces together from your subconscious, as opposed to actually planting thoughts in your head. But actually, this does seem like planting thoughts in their
Yeah.
head.
It might be.
Yeah.
It's definitely left ambiguous, exactly. Because we only experience it from his point of view, where he doesn't know he's being influenced, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
And making such a different decision so quickly. I think he had his weapon ready to go, and like a few seconds before he fired it was when he changed his mind, right? So
Yes.
it's kind of terrifying that you make a big decision like that in a few seconds. But then he has a full-fledged plan in his head now, planted there by the twins. What else?
Any other thoughts about that? Otherwise, I
Yeah.
will pivot slightly.
Yes.
I just want to talk. I mentioned I want to talk about the structure of this in relation to the series at large. I think it is. So I have a theory, and I don't know if this is true, but that in some ways, this book is kind of a. So there are 10 books in the Book of the Fallen series, and there's 7 acts in this book. So it doesn't map on perfectly, but I do wonder if this book at large works as sort of a key to the structure of the rest of the series, particularly as a book one. One of the things that stands out to me is the way in which Act 1 and Act 2 switch between a completely different cast of characters. And so Erikson is kind of very early on introducing us to the idea that we're not necessarily just going to be following one group of characters. We're not just going to have one main character, which is the most divisive aspect, I believe, of this series. Is book to book, the cast changes. And there are characters who continue throughout, but I don't think there's any character who's in all 10 books. And so that is something if readers don't know. I imagine you've heard about it because it's widely talked about. But the next books, you start an entirely different continent with a new cast of characters, and that's all I'll say about that. There is some overlap, but it's largely new people. And so that's something I'm going to keep my eye on, is the idea that maybe this book, in some way, now knowing where the 10 books go and kind of how they're laid out, if you see a similar sort of structure, because I do believe there is a structure to the 10-book series. If it kind of plays out in a similar fashion over the structure of this individual novel, Gardens of the Moon. And so if there are any other rereaders, I would be curious if they have thoughts about that, or if they are, if that's something, if they're rereading along, to look into as well.
Yeah, I like that. Something to track for me as well. Yeah. Do we now move on to Animanderic and therefore Crone, the final thing on our list for today?
Steve.
The crone is so we were first introduced to the crone. It's kind of a creepy, mysterious creature, and then later Garuk is kind of laughing about the crone sitting there. He's trying to make it obvious he's laughing. There's lots of humor in this book that I don't know if I just didn't catch before, but because it takes a turn there because it's this walking crone. It's like and then Garuk's just trying not to laugh at him because he's being fed on the head. I don't know, it's just hilarious.
Talking to him, and the noble douchebag can't hear it talking. And I do love that. Crone is so. Ray comments that Crone is like melodramatic, but also Crone is like very funny. and is like always making fun of people, and
Yeah.
kind of has it in a dry sense of way, like a very has a very dry sense of humor. But yeah, Crony's a great character. She's hysterical.
But it's got the personality that I can imagine a crow having,
Yeah,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Probably very easy to bribe with baubles or whatever shiny thing, right? But still very wise in other ways,
And
right?
sassy,
Yeah.
very sassy. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking of Gothi and Getly, but not quite. Nowhere in the ballpark. But they are the crows in Children of Memory by Adrian Tchaikovsky. But what was I
I mean,
going
it's got a bit of a similar vibe in a sense.
Yeah, a little bit. In
In a weird sort of, I don't know, like the way their brains are not exactly human
hmm,
in the thought pattern. You know what I mean?
yeah. A little bit of snark and sort of like I don't
Yeah.
yeah, maybe.
Like they're wise, they're smart, but the way they're saying things
In a very non-human
is
way. Yeah,
yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I love that she comes to Baruch, gives him information, gets all like high-handed about it, and it's like, give me food.
Oh yeah.
It's so true.
And he's like, yeah, I'll give you the leftovers. And she's like, yeah, I'm cool with it. You'd think she'd refuse, that she'd be too good for the leftovers. But she's like, yeah, I'll eat them.
He's a great raven. Yeah.
Still an animal, I guess, in a sense.
I also just love that like she shows up, is basically a messenger, and then is like, oh, you have this guy who's here to like pull you into some stupid shit. Allow me to stay behind and talk shit about this guy and give you advice. And she just like doesn't know Baruch. Like she doesn't like whatever, you know? And she's like, no, but I'm gonna stay here and I'm gonna talk shit this entire time and tell you what to do. Like she literally just stays around and bosses him around. It's hysterical. Like she just takes charge. And I can't imagine being like Anamanda Rake and she's just like hanging out and is like telling you, bossing you around all the time.
Yeah. I can imagine him doing like, oh no, the war council or something like that, and the Raven is there saying, no, that's a stupid idea. You shouldn't do
Exactly.
that. You know what's gonna happen.
You've been alive 100,000 years and you haven't learned a thing.
Yeah, if you die, I'm not gonna have my lunch. So
Yeah.
don't die.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're saying stuff like that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. There was something else that she said. Oh yeah, that she looks like a dog to the guy who shows up, and she says something really snarky about him too, right? and she sounds like a whining dog the whole time. Yeah, yeah, she's a pretty brilliant character. She even
What
like looks down upon the other ravens. She's like, nah, I don't have time for these kids. I gotta go. I have places to be.
what are, on that note, everyone's favorite characters at this point in the book? Crone, obviously, leading the path for the
Crone.
murder, as it may be.
I think Sorry might be my favorite so far.
That's a very steep choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very tragic. That's
Yeah.
my thing.
Dan's thinking.
Who do I like?
Who do you like?
Who do I like?
I love Hairlock, I gotta say.
Oh,
Hairlock's
yes.
very
A little
funny.
psycho. He's so funny. I do think I appreciate Tattersail much more this time around.
Tattersail is the most fleshed out until
Yes,
now.
like
right?
she's very sassy. She's grieving. There's a lot of stuff kind of going on under the surface with her, and she's mysterious in ways that I don't think I think I took her as a much more two-dimensional character on my first, at least the beginning of my first read through. But there's a lot of kind of mystery to her and things going on under the surface. Like I forget if I mentioned this earlier, but like she is clearly like Bellarden and her are like very much acting in parallel as characters right now, where they're both grieving their lover's death in the same battle. You know, they're both these powerful mages, and they're handling it wildly differently.
Yeah, I don't think Tattersail is really that affected, it seems, from the way it's described.
I disagree. And I think you read into her behavior, she's absolutely. That's the thing is, I think it's easy to look past it because she particularly early on thinks about him more.
Yeah.
But to me, a lot of it is the subtext of the scenes and how she's acting,
Mm.
the decisions she's making, like the fact that she's this obsessed with what's going on, and that she decides to stay rather than just running away is entirely motivated by revenge and this sense of like wanting. She's grieving this guy that she had fallen in love with, but had never used that word or like processed it. This was a friends with benefits that she maybe had stronger feelings for than she realized.
It makes sense.
Yeah, I think also maybe Belladin was more deep in the relationship than Tatersail seems to have been. And I think Tatersail has a possibly wider sense of guilt than Belladin has because she feels responsible for losing the entire army. She was the head of the mage cadre or whatever that title is. And the opening sequence, which was so poignant and profound, was like the sense of like overwhelming guilt that she has, and we get echoes of it throughout the chapters that we read this week too. Yeah, she is very much grieving, not just her partner though, but I think everything that happened at the siege.
I agree.
Hmm.
Any other characters standing out? I have in my first read through, I know Perrin, I immediately gravitated towards him. And while I do like him, I'm not as entranced by him as I was the first time through.
It's interesting because I have the opposite. I was not impressed by the guy at all the first time around. And now I am latching onto him a lot more and like knowing him as a character.
Do you think it's because you know where his story goes, or is it just this time around you're like connecting more with what is actively happening to him on the page?
Both, I think. I think where he's going to end up is it's only in the sense of like, oh, he was always like this. Where he ends up is like there are notes of it this early on, so there is that aspect of interest, but also just how people are reacting to him, and I think this is also a product of knowing how the series keeps sort of twisting your expectations, or like sets out a character to be something and then it turns out to be something else altogether. There are some slight variations on that, I guess, with how people react to Paran, right? It happens pretty quickly. It's not quite so long drawn out, and those kinds of things are usually directed at the reader, not other characters, although sometimes it's done through the other characters' interpretation of characters. But in this case, it's see Paran make quick judgments of him, especially I think the one with the agent that he meets at the docks is particularly representative, where the moment he starts talking to him, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe this guy will do after all. Like he has this huge monologue about just how garbage he thinks Paran is, and then as soon as he starts talking, it's, oh no, you might be fine after all. I can see why Lon likes you. So yeah, I think I'm noticing that kind of thing more before I probably didn't. So I'm tracking his character and enjoying reading his interact. And I like he's just like really snarky with everyone. And I think my initial read, I was like, just this rude boy.
He's definitely an underdog, right? That's something that makes him, I think, very sympathetic. Is he's a fish out of water, kind of thrown into this, and he wants to try really hard. Like he wants to do right, but he doesn't really understand what the hell's going on.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's a lot to like about Paran. Krupp. I can't believe nobody mentioned Krupp.
I love Krupp.
If he didn't talk the way he did, if he talked in first person, I would love him too, but it's just
that's his
person.
whole thing.
That's not his whole thing.
So
like he's got personality more than that.
That's true. But it's the other characters find him annoying too. So it's I like that we're meant to be annoyed by him, but there's something so funny about it.
You're definitely not alone, Dan. He is an incredibly divisive character, and I adore him in all his annoyingness and magnanimity.
Yeah. To me, it feels, at least for now, that we haven't spent too much, but we've had so many different characters. It's kind of hard to get attached too much or have a favorite yet
Yeah.
for me. Like I have different scenes which I've liked. And even thinking about the series, I remember more like scenes or specific things happening more than characters. Because they're like the setup to those scenes and how they're described and everything and whatever happens in that chapter is very well done. More than a specific character line that I remember very well,
That's interesting you
personally.
say that, because that I think that's how I felt, particularly in the first few books in my first read through, and I'm having a different reaction now, where I am much
Mm,
more emotional. I think because I'm having an easier job tracking what's actually happening, that
yeah.
I'm having an easier time also emotionally connecting with the characters. And so, like again, like Tattersail was one that like I'd never fully emotionally connected to, and now this time I'm like I'm all in on her story. Um, Similarly, I'm feeling more for um, a number of the bridge burners at this point.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's entirely down to the baggage of their story in the future, but
Hmm.
also I think being able to appreciate the subtleties of their relationships now and like see kind of appreciate their character work that's happening early on.
yeah. I think the bridge burners were particularly hard for me to track the first time around, especially because their names didn't feel like names. They're all words. So,
Whiskey Jack.
yeah, and fiddler and mallet. Yeah, it took some time. It took a few books for those names to be hammered in, like to the point where I recognized them. So
Yeah.
Shall we do quotes? Was there anything else that we should have talked about? Baruch and Anomander Rick, that conversation.
They're teaming up seemingly. That
Yeah.
is worth at least mentioning.
Yeah.
See where that goes. It's interesting we haven't talked about Anomander Rake, who is such a fan favorite, but I mean I think he's and his introduction is awesome, but you know, well, he's not the standout for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting the whole things he says about what happened at Pale, because we didn't have a perspective before, right? It
Yeah.
feels very different now based on how he describes it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And apparently they shouldn't unleash some demons on them. We didn't see that. Tattersail didn't see that. So that's new information. And speaking of demons, there are two assassins that speak to each other. I think they're assassins, or at least two characters on the rooftop. And they're
Yeah.
referred to as it the whole time. And I don't think it's because that's the gender. Like, I don't think it's it as in the gender neutral
They
pronoun.
refer to what is it?
There are two assassins who are talking to each
Yeah.
other.
They
And
refer to themselves as it?
yeah, like the third person perspective is saying
I
it.
remember this.
Yeah.
I remember
Oh,
some.
yeah,
Are
yeah.
these the assassins that get killed?
No, I think so. Hunter. They're called hunters, not assassins. So page 146 in the trade paperback edition. Across the street from the ramshackle Phoenix Inn, a hunter stood at the roof's edge and studied the door through which the thief had just passed. The crossbow lay cradled in its arms. So its arms, and I think the two hunters, they're both referred to as it in this whole
You're
section.
right. I completely missed that. Good catch there. That's interesting and creepy. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I just assumed it was some sort of, it was just like, because they're just a figure, they're not, characterized as a person. That's why it's saying it. But it's like giving it to a more, how do I say? I don't know, threatening feel.
Yeah. That's
But
possible.
there might be something more to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Didn't notice.
No. Could be Moranth, could be some other creatures we haven't met yet, or could be humans with gender neutral pronouns. I don't know. But we haven't seen that done anywhere else, though. Sorry?
Yeah. You would think they would use they, like a singular they. It's interesting.
More involved.
It is not like normally, because we consider that pretty typically dehumanizing, right? Like you call someone it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's interesting. I don't remember this and if they are significant characters or not. So I'm intrigued by that. That's an interesting.
Yeah. I want to
thing
text
you
you a
got there.
theory
Okay.
But I don't know if it
Yeah.
plays out. Like I don't remember these creatures, so we'll see. But oh, and there was one interaction with the guards where one of them says it's a miserable night, and the others, do you have any other insights you want to give us? More wisdom about how miserable the night is.
I love the snark.
Yep. And yeah, I think that's about it for me. Any other topics? Any other scenes? If not, let's do quotes.
Quotes.
Steve.
All right, prepared this week. Page 120 in the trade paperback. Weariness hung heavy in the room like bitter incense, redolent with sweat and tension.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah. I like the thing about healing on the next page, about how the mind and body need to heal together. Like that's the theory of healing.
Yeah.
And Paran is going to suffer from it, maybe, because he's been healed physically with no regard for how he will recover mentally. So we have to see what the fallout of that is. So that'll be interesting. I like the thing that Paran has about empire. Where is it?
That was the one I was looking for as well.
Yeah. Do you want to read it?
I don't have it in
Page
front of me.
84 if you have this edition. Or page 85 actually.
You go ahead, because I can't find it.
Okay. At the very heart of things, he realized he no longer knew who was the ultimate betrayer in all of this. If a betrayer there must be. Was the empire the empress, or was it something else? A legacy, an ambition, a vision at the far end of peace and wealth for all? Or was it a beast that could not cease devouring? Darujistan, the greatest city in the world, would it come to the empire in flames? Was there wisdom in opening its gates? Within the troubled borders of the Malazan Empire, people lived in such peace as their ancestors had never imagined. And if not for the claw, for the endless wars in distant lands, there would be freedom as well. Had this been the emperor's dream at the very beginning? Did it matter anymore?
Yeah. Steven, I like that quote too.
That's
Yeah.
a wonderful passage.
Yeah.
Because it does, yeah.
That's a key thematic. One of the key thematic points of the whole series is the question, like the nature of empires and the Malazan Empire in particular. But the idea of, like, is an empire good, bad, in between? What is it? Is it something that? Yeah, just the question of empire, I think, is very interesting.
And to me, it also asks the question, which is a question you can ask about our history, is history driven by exceptional people that, bend the culture and whatever to their will, or are these exceptional people that we remember just a product of a culture, and if they didn't rise up, someone similar would have filled that void in a similar way.
Kind of like the superheroes. And
I kind of like the other opinion, but
that the void would be filled anyway.
well, but these people are just manifestation of the times and culture of a period. It's like the impulse of the masses.
Yeah.
That realizes itself in one person, I guess. But
yeah.
But I don't know which one is actually real.
I think that's one of those that I don't know if you can find out definitively. I feel like historians will be arguing about it and philosophers until the end of time.
Yeah. Yeah, because you can't just go back and try it the other way and see what happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I also like this exchange between Topper and Paran, who, when Topper says that the Empress expects obedience of her servants and demands loyalty, Paran says any reasonable ruler would have the expectation and the demand the other way around.
I did spend some time just thinking about that. When it actually, actually thinking, wait, it sounds like, well, what does it actually mean? It felt very second ordeal sort of quote,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the part that stood out to me was the demanding loyalty bit. Like, I don't know so much about obedience. Expect obedience, fine, but loyalty is not something you demand. So that's the part that stood out to me from that quote. But
Well,
perhaps
it
there's
is
something
something.
about obedience
Well,
too.
kings do demand loyalty from their vassals, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? Or do they expect it?
It's,
I don't know.
I mean, I feel like there is a mental component to loyalty that you cannot demand. It's either there or it's not, or it has to be earned. Um,
I guess it depends what you think about loyalty. What is
Yeah.
loyalty? Is like you thinking good, that you're gonna follow, or you doing the action of being loyal. Because you might think different than the action you do, right?
Yeah, exactly. So are you doing so if you're just doing something that has been asked of you, you're being obedient, but if you're willing
I
to do
guess.
it, then you're being loyal too, right? Or if you
This is
agree
that
with the
distinction. I don't
premise.
know. Maybe I don't know English enough.
I don't know. Maybe I'm also going off of strange definitions of the words. I
No,
don't
maybe you're
know.
right. I'm gonna
But
check it actually, what the actual definition is.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. For me, loyalty, the way I think of loyalty, I feel like there has to be a willingness associated with it.
That makes sense.
So demanding seems strange.
Expecting, I guess if you behave in the correct way, then you can expect someone to be loyal to you. If they all feel,
Yeah.
if you're filling your role and they should fill the role they should fill.
Yeah, exactly. It's like trust, isn't
Okay.
it? You can't
Yeah.
demand that somebody trusts you. You have to earn their trust. So
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, just in the 2 pages we had open, I have like 7 underlines, but I guess I'll do one last, and then if anybody else has any more, we can talk about them. When Tatasale thinks to us, I think this is Tatasale, it's always better when hatred and outrage stay pure and uncompromised, because she starts to understand Teichiren, like that he's an adept, and starts to connect with him, and it's like, no, I don't want that. I don't want to simmer my hatred. Anything else? Any other interesting quotes?
I think we'd be here all night.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. I guess we're done. Then
So for chapters, we'll
yes.
put it in the comments, but I'm thinking through, what is it?
To book 4.
10?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To the end of book 3, basically.
Mhm.
Yeah. So up to the end of chapter 10.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's where I have my little mark
Perfect.
suggesting
Yeah.
where we stop. So yeah. So let's go that far. So chapters 7 through 10.
Yep.
Yeah, for next week.
Fantastic.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for listening, everybody. We will see you next week for chapters 7 through 10. And once again, if you'd like to join us for these discussions, consider checking out the pagechewing forum, or join us for any of the other, tens of group reads we have going on.
It's ridiculous.
We're reading the SF Masterworks, we're reading The Wars of Light and Shadow, and yeah, we've got a lot of, and some, I guess we're reading Parable of the Sower now. Although by the time you listen to this, we won't be anymore. But you can join us for Parable of the Talents. But yes, check out the pagechewing forum. That's the summary of all of that. And thank you so much for listening. Bye. We'll see you next week.